Okay, we're live. Chris, can you hear me all right? Oh, I think you're on mute. Let me see if I can unmute you here. All right, you good?
Hey, yeah.
There you are. There you are. All right. Let's if you're here, let us know in the chat. I want to know who's our real friends and who are the people who we have to hunt down after this live stream. So let us know if you're here. I want to know who my real friends are. Okay, we got Kasal here. Good guy. Salesforce BDR. What we'd love to talk about today, kind of the agenda for today is really we're going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to ask Chris a ton of hard-hitting questions, some gotcha questions about how he's broken to tech sales, how he's become an enterprise AE so quickly, and then we'll have time for your guys' questions. And so yeah, be listening, think of some good questions, and yeah, we'll go from there. So kind of start off, we'll start with introductions. And so I'll go quickly through me so we can get to Chris. I'm the founder of Tech Sales Mentors. What we do is we help top SDRs get jobs at top tech companies. And so we run their job search, we get them into interviews, we help them prepare for those interviews, we help them negotiate their offers, and we help people do this in 50 days. And so if you're interested in getting sort of, a top SDR job at a top tech company, check us out, techsalesmentors.com. But yeah, Chris, would love to, talk more about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. But before I do, I will just say hello back to everybody in the chat. I don't see a way for us to chat back to you guys, but thank you to everybody who said hi to us in the chat. Yeah. So I'm Chris DuVall. I am a enterprise account executive with Hubspot. I live in Gallatin, which is close to Nashville in Tennessee, with my wife and our new baby. Yeah, and I've been working in tech sales for, I don't know, over, let's see, I guess I started in tech sales not that long ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah. Cool. So kind of maybe we'll start with, the journey of like getting into tech sales, right? So tell us like where you weren't always in sales, right? I know it was in your family, but like for you, there was sort of a starting point into sales. Like what was that for you?
Yeah, my first official sales role after college was as a loan officer for a company called Churchill Mortgage. So I helped people when you buy a home, you typically need a loan for it, and you figure out which company you're going to use to provide that loan. And so I was a loan officer at those companies, and that is a quota carrying sales role. I did that for I think 2 years before I realized that I was starting to get disrupted by software, by technology. I saw, like Mark Andreessen says, that software is eating the world. And I decided at some point that I wanted to be disrupting things and not disrupted by things. And that was when I made the choice to try to get into tech sales.
Awesome. And like, what was that like? Sort of, I know you went to Dell, you didn't do the BDR route, you went the account manager route. What was that interview process like? How'd you go about breaking into that role? And more so, what was that job search like in general?
Yeah, I tried to immediately get an account executive role, obviously, because I did not want to take a step back in my career. I think that's super common when people come into the tech sales, software sales space, is they want to match their title or their pay but sell software or sell technology. Typically, you can't do that, and I tried for probably 6 months to do that and kept getting rejected in later stages from account executive roles before I had to eat some humble pie and realized I needed to take a step back in my career in order to step into a much larger job market, a bigger pond where I had a lot more opportunity to advance over the course of my career.
Yeah.
And that's why I accepted an account manager position with Dell.
Yeah. And I think like it makes sense, right? You should shoot for the stars and see like, hey, what's the best role I can get? But also like the way I think about this is a little bit like, in finance, they kind of talk about like, oh, this is a bull market. This is a bear market, right? Bull market's a good market. Bear market is like when stocks are going down. And so you should think about that like your job search, right? Like you should go after bull opportunities where you're sort of super optimistic on what's possible. But you should have a range, right? You should have bear opportunities as well. It's like, hey, this is a minimum I'm willing to accept, just so then you're not like, stuck in a demoralizing job search forever. And I also think the best way to approach life is like, hey, have options. If you're like banking on sort of one opportunity, you're going to be more nervous in the interview. You're going to feel like it's higher stakes than it should be. You're not going to perform like up to how you should perform. Versus if you have lots of companies, you're like, okay, I don't need any of these companies. You feel more of like, it's more a mental thing of more of a position of power when you're interviewing. And that's often what it is sort of, storytelling, confidence, all that kind of stuff. And so maybe we can fast forward a little bit. You went to Dell. 3 years later, you end up as an enterprise account executive at HubSpot. That doesn't usually happen, right? Usually it takes 6-7 years. How did that happen so quickly for you?
Yeah. So from starting in tech sales to accepting a role with HubSpot as an enterprise AE was around 3 years. And so that went from 60K to a OTE of about $220,000 in that 3-year period. What happened there when I went to Dell Technologies, I already knew I had my mission in mind, the area that I wanted to hit, and that was to become an account executive with Dell. And so I hyper focused on that for 2 years at Dell. And I did my work at Dell to the exclusion of everything else. I hyper focused on it. I didn't have a social life. I actually didn't date or anything like that. I was just gunning for this account executive role with Dell. And at that time, I met a coworker, a girl that was also working at Dell that I ended up falling in love with. And I got the offer to become an account executive with Dell, and I would have to move across the country to Phoenix, Arizona. And what I realized was that I would either have to break up with this girl to accept this role across the country, or I would have to give up on the thing that my dream, the dream opportunity that I'd been working so hard, nights, weekends, all this blood, sweat, and tears into. And I made the decision to give up that position with Dell Technologies to decline that position. And then very shortly after that, I proposed to my girlfriend at the time, and now we are happily married. We actually just had our first kid. Amazing. And and so putting what I lucked into there was that when I put my why, when I put the thing that was significant first, it ended up actually unlocking a lot more doors. If I had accepted that role with Dell Technologies, then that role is mostly a hardware sales role. Software sales roles are obviously a lot more lucrative, a lot more successful trajectory than hardware sales roles. And so when I rejected that role, I realized I had to go into a remote environment. That was remote account executive sales was not as hot as it is now. Yeah. And I was able to parlay my skills and especially parlay my why into an account executive role with a cybersecurity company called JumpCloud. And when they asked, why do you want to transition to JumpCloud? I told that story that I just said. And I said that I wanted to serve in a bigger way and sell in a bigger way. And software sales allows me to impact more people with my sales. And I also wanted to get married to my girlfriend and have a family and build a family. And that's a very similar story that I told when I took that AE position at JumpCloud. That's a very similar story that I told. It's a very similar why to what I told at HubSpot when I moved from JumpCloud to HubSpot. And so there are universal values that people have. And when you tell your universal truth, when you tell something that is true, your why in an impactful way, it opens up a lot of doors for you in your career.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, sometimes when people are interviewing, sometimes it's like, the answer they try to give is, hey, what does this person want to hear? And there is an element to that is important to consider. But there's also just like outside of what you're saying, how you say it, you can tell if someone is like truly authentically, passionately describing what they actually feel about it. It just shines through, right? And so like there's no way you like anyone who like didn't have a family could give that same answer the way you did, because you did have that family. You were shooting for that. Humans, like we have this sort of this like, ability to like really suss out bullshit and know if someone is actually legit in what they're saying or not, right? Like when you look on TikTok or whatever, there's plenty of scam artists, right? It's easy to just scroll over them because you can just tell like this guy's a jokester and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's very true. Being authentic is key. And so outside of that, maybe a little bit more tactically, like at Jump Cloud, you were an account executive, right? And so generally, right, like the account executive progression is like, oh, I do the SMB account executive role, and then the mid-market role, and then the enterprise role. And so how did you kind of like, how did that happen through Jump Cloud? And then like you just jumped to, you know, HubSpot so quickly as the enterprise AE. Tell me more about that.
Right. And I can give specifics about this, but really there's a universal truth to what I did here. So specifically what happened is Jump Cloud hadn't yet defined their account executive roles. They were a Series Z startup, and they hadn't said, oh, you are a small business or a medium business account executive. Yeah. And they just hadn't reached that developmental stage yet. And so my title was just account executive. And so someone could say that's the reason you were able to jump to an enterprise account executive position, but it's really not. If they had defined me as a small business or a medium business account executive, I would have been able to put together a story for why I was would be a compelling candidate for an enterprise account executive role. And so the core and everyone in the audience here, maybe you're not. You haven't found the love of your life, so you can't tell that why story, but you do have some hugely impactful why story that you can leverage in these situations. You can build these hugely impactful stories, which life is stories. People think that life is facts, but they don't even accurately remember what they ate for lunch that day. Life is a series of stories, and mostly it's stories that we tell ourselves. So when you learn to craft authentic stories and powerful stories, then you change your own perspective of the world, and you can change other people's perspective of the world too. And so the story that I was telling there from Jump Cloud to HubSpot was, you know, they asked me, did I have enterprise level selling experience? And I did. I had experience selling into large enterprise account sets, and they asked a lot of questions that I could answer from experience that I had at Jump Cloud. But I was also more prepared than the other people that they were interviewing, and I had more compelling reasons why they should hire me. And you all can craft that too. It's not something that's exclusively mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I'll say, like, you know, for the audience, like Chris is very humble. And so like, he's not going to say this, but like he outworks anyone I know at all. And so, you know, something to like bear in mind in this world is like, again, I'm going to reference TikTok because I think TikTok's a little bit silly, but we'll see like maybe you're interested in tech sales and you came across it because of TikTok and you saw, oh, it's these remote high paying jobs. You can live wherever you want. You can vacation wherever you want. Okay, there's an element to that is true. But if you want to be a top performer in life, if you want to make a lot of money, like you're not going to do it not doing any work in our industry. At the end of the day, like this role compensates well because people work hard and people perform. And so that's just something to bear in mind for anyone listening. Like part of the reason Chris was able to pull this off in 3 years is because he outworked everyone around him. And yeah, like he said, the weekends, nights, all that kind of stuff. And so it's to tell you that like, you know, this industry isn't, there's sort of riches to be made in this industry, but it doesn't come without hard work. So something to always bear in mind there. So let's transition a little bit. So, you know, you have been, you know, how we got connected was sort of through, we kind of do similar things. We help SDRs get jobs in tech sales. And so you've been doing this for a little bit. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the SDR hiring market. How have you kind of seen it change from when you started helping people maybe a few years ago during the pandemic when tech was on fire, hiring was on fire, to now when, you know, there's layoffs and 5,000 applicants on a job opening, all that kind of stuff? What differences have you seen?
Right. The experience level that the hiring companies want is obviously different. Previously, maybe if you were just a teacher, if you were a teacher, then maybe that would be enough experience to go work for in a BDR, SDR role. Increasingly, what they want to see is quota carrying experience, that you've had 4 to 6 months of quota carrying experience. And then when a role has 1,000 people in it, you're seeing a lot more requirements. And most of the time, the first thing that the recruiters or the hiring company is looking for is how do we turn this 1,000 applicants into 200 or 150? That's a manageable amount. And so what they're looking for is the smallest error that they can use to completely disqualify someone. And that's a very different mindset than a year ago when they were desperately just looking to try to fill these seats. And so it's increasingly important to be very well polished, to have everything in a line, to have your resume, your LinkedIn, all your answers polished, and understand your own story, your own why, all the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And like, you know, it's just because hiring's hard doesn't mean this industry still isn't worth it. Like if you look over a 5, 10, 15, 20-year time horizon, it seems like software is only going to continue to be more widely adopted by consumers and, you know, businesses as well. But yeah, you got to put in a little bit more work right now. And if you're a candidate without sales experience, go get it outside of tech. There's lots of opportunities. Glen Coco is some outsourced SDR agency. You can get it in sort of other industries. TQL is some, you know, freight and logistics company. Angie is, you know, another sort of, you know, marketplace company. And these aren't sort of the best sales opportunities. But again, if you're in tech sales for the medium to long term outcome of it, then do these necessary steps. If you want sort of medium to long term success in life, that means you have to make short term sacrifices. And so, you know, as an example, I remember starting as an entrepreneur. The rest of my friends were continuing their tech sales careers and making a lot more than me in the early days of entrepreneurship. Now that's finally changing, and you know, this is finally paying off. And so, if you want to be in this industry, there is, you know, riches to it, but it doesn't mean there isn't sacrifices that have to be made. And so, maybe what we could talk a little bit about is like, you've been working with like, you know, SDR candidates and all that kind of stuff. And you help them like story tell, like you've been saying earlier. Where do you think are like the biggest mistakes SDR candidates are making in interviews that they can improve upon?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people mistake is their personality for a weakness. And so, to name two examples of that, I just talked to a candidate yesterday, and we're trying to craft their, you know, why, you know, tell me your background, or like why do you want to work in sales? And they were papering over the fact that their wife just got pregnant and that they were about to have a kid. It's like, that is huge. Why do you want to work in sales? Why do you want to sell? It's because you have a gift. You know, God has given you a gift to sell. You're uniquely good at this thing, and you want to use that to serve your wife and your kid and serve your family. I had another candidate who said, you know, why do I want to be in sales? Well, the real reason, he told me this privately, he says, the real reason that I want to be in sales is because I lived in a trailer park for multiple years, and I had to eat expired food. And there were points in my life when I was worried about getting kicked out of the trailer park because I was behind on my payments. And I never, ever want to be in that situation again. And I said, don't tell me that privately. Tell the companies that. Yeah. He said, I will outwork anyone. And I've done it in multiple jobs. I always get there before anyone else in the office. I always leave the latest, and I will always do that because I will never allow myself to be put back in that situation. That's an incredibly compelling story. Other people grew up around poverty in other countries, and they said, well, I never want my parents to be around that, to experience that. Yeah. So often what we see BDRs or SDRs do is, or people do, is hide their vulnerabilities, hide their mistakes, and hide the things that they've done wrong. When really those are the things that make you the most human. That make people love you and care about you and wake up and see you as a person instead of just another applicant among thousands.
Yeah, totally. Like our scars are what make us, right? And that totally makes sense there. I like if you were to think about it, right? Like let's say you're a recruiter, right? You interview 10 candidates in a week for a role or whatever, 5 to 10 candidates. You're not going to remember every interview. And, you know, most of those interviews are going to be kind of boring. And the truth of the matter is because all those candidates are saying the same thing. I'm a hard worker. You know, I have quota carrying experience. Like, tell me a story that shows you're a hard worker. Don't tell me you're a hard worker. Like, we don't watch, you know, Batman movies because they're telling me how he's a gritty guy. No, they're like showing me like beating someone's ass, right? Then I know, oh, he's a gritty guy, right? And so, yeah, you got to use stories to differentiate yourself, because those stories that you have, no one else has those same stories. Another candidate, I think we may be talking about the same candidate here, but he was telling me how, like, when he was 12 years old, he started selling at 12 years old, and he was selling like CDs on the street and like t-shirts for a band. And he's like, oh, like, these tech salespeople like think like that's scammy and like hustlery and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, no, that shows like you're not a tourist to sales. That shows like you are a seller. And like that would be an example. Like another example is like door-to-door sales. Anytime you can tell a SDR manager you've done door-to-door sales, they're like, cool, these cold calls are going to be a breeze for you, right? Because you've gotten rejected to your actual face like all the time. And so yeah, it can be hard to know, like, sometimes, like, hey, what's acceptable to say and what's not. And so that's why like mentorship with people in the industry is key. But yeah, like these things can be really impactful. And so another story I kind of want to talk about is like how we got connected. And so, Chris, you're one of the more unique individuals I've met, and like just in the most wonderful sense. And so like, can you tell me a little bit more about, like, we were kind of competitors in what we were doing, like tech sales mentors versus get hired in tech sales. Why'd you decide to like reach out to me and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'm going to put my wife on blast, and so I have to preface this because my wife is incredible, and you 99% of the time has way better advice and wisdom than I do. But in this case,
1%.
Yeah, this is it. This is that 1%. Yeah, Samir and I were doing the same thing, helping people get hired in tech sales or very similar things. And I said to my wife, I looked at the industry and I said, a lot of these people are just sort of scammers. They're not actually helping people. But this guy's really legit, and he seems really legit. And I think I'm just going to reach out to him and see if we can figure out a way that we can help each other and work together, even though we're competitors. She was like, you can't do that. You can't reach out to a competitor and ask, like, a competitor's not going to help you. And I said, well, I thought about it. I said, you're probably right, but I don't really want to live a lifestyle like that. I want to live a lifestyle where, regardless of whether or not it's true, I always assume that the pie is bigger and that we can help more people. And that there's everybody can help each other. Giving you a slice of pie does not take food out of my mouth. And so I've tried for a long time, for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, I've tried to live that lifestyle, and it has had incredible positive results for me. It doesn't mean the feeling of being scared about it doesn't go away, but I've always pursued it. I've always tried to do that, and it has so far had incredible results. So I reached out to Samir and I said, hey, I know we're competitors, but I'd love to meet and see maybe if there's ways we can work together. And then we have been working together lately, and it's had an amazing positive growth result instead of the opposite. And so if you're in the audience and you're thinking, you have a mindset of there's only so much out there, I have to get mine, and maybe like I want to cut somebody else from being successful in order to increase my odds, I would encourage you to just try it the other way. And I think you'll be shocked, pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think, and to be honest, like, up until recently, I agreed with, Olivia, your wife. Like, I was of the same mindset. Like, you mentioned, hey, we should reach out to this one competitor. I was like, that's weird. Like, I don't want to do that. But you're right. Like, you can't have sort of this zero-sum thinking in your mindset. And of course, like, you'll get rejected. But like, again, that's sales, right? Like, the point is that you got to shoot your shot, and it's going to work sometimes, right? Or like recently I heard someone talk about batting average, right? Like it's a baseball stat, right? And so like, oh, if you have a 300 batting average, that means, don't kill me, baseball fans, but that means 3 out of 10 times you like hit a good hit or whatever. And 300 is like good. And so like, yeah, you got to shoot your shot, and amazing things happen. Like, you're one of the best people I've ever worked with. And, I'm grateful that you reached out to me. And so, let's shift gears now. And audience, feel free to start throwing in questions. We're going to start getting going with that soon. And so I only have a few left, and then we can get to what you guys all want to talk about here. So now you're in the enterprise AE world, and it's been something you've wanted, right? It's something you set your goals to. You had this expectation of, when I become an enterprise AE, like, this is what my life is going to be like, all this kind of stuff. How does that compare to like the reality of now you're in this world? Tell me more about that.
Right. I think I just wanted to be an enterprise account executive because I love sales. And so that may not be everybody out there. A lot of people probably are interested in it because of the pay, because of working remotely. But the reality is, most of the reason that I was able to advance a lot faster than my peers is because what I do with working remotely is work more efficiently. So I work 2 more hours that somebody else is commuting. It's common for me to work Saturdays and Sundays, and my wife and I don't like traveling. We like to stay home because we're more efficient. Yes, we can go afford to take an expensive vacation, but the reality is that most of the people that are working in enterprise sales are not taking a lot or any vacations because they're being productive. They're working their butts off, and that's how they got to that position. One thing you will realize in life, I think, or maybe people in the audience have already realized this kind of stuff, is that definitely as you get older, or maybe as you get into these positions, then the things that you valued when you're younger don't have the same shine to them. So vacations, we don't like to travel because we love where we live. We love our neighborhood and our community and our neighbors and walking around in the park by our house. Fancy sports cars, I don't want to maintain that or like wash a car like that.
Yeah.
A big house, I don't want to clean a big house. Like, we have a tiny little townhouse in the suburbs. We love it. And
Yeah.
we're much lower stress than somebody who has the same income as we do, but lives in a big city, has a big house, has a fancy car, because those people have like a lot of debts. They don't have a lot of savings, and there's still risks in sales. You can get laid off. So you want to have an emergency fund. You want to have a big amount of savings. But you end up being like way more consistently happy when you have way more of a schedule and you're not partying and you're not traveling and all this crazy stuff. You end up day to day, moment to moment being way happier.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. I love that. I love that. So, so we got a question here from Christopher Johnson. So you're doing all these great things, right? You're, you're top performing AE, you're mentoring candidates, SDR candidates, you're spending valuable time with, Olivia and baby Dean. How do you sort of go about managing all of these things?
Yeah. Great question. I didn't say I was top performing. There are people at HubSpot that are doing better than I am, and they're devoting 100% of their resources to enterprise selling. I'm not number one in my org or something like that, and a big reason for that is I'm sort of trying to optimize all these different values in my life, which is like, my relationship with God, my relationship with my wife and kid. Actually, my wife comes before my kid. So my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my kid, and then my being healthy, sleeping and eating healthy, and then balancing the work I do with HubSpot today. My main focus today, and then potentially future main focuses with Samir and Tech Sales Mentors, things like that. So I don't try to do something to exclusivity. If you want some secrets to success, one of the things you can do is you can do sprints in your life. So it's typical for me to be doing like a 30 or a 60-day sprint of where I'm hyper focused on health or hyper focused on working out, and then shift it to something else. And the other thing is, like, there's so much time people waste. And as you start if you build up the muscle of working way more hours, counterintuitively, you start to need way smaller breaks. You'll see like an hour as this huge, luxurious, an hour to do nothing. That's incredible. It's a huge amount of time. So it's like we cut out sugar from our diet. I don't know, like 4 or 5 months ago. And now if we eat like have some small pieces, like we have a yogurt. It's like a mountain. It's like a skyscraper, a yogurt.
Yeah. Yeah, don't worry. When I come visit you guys, we'll integrate sugar back into the diet. There'll be Sour Patch Kids, there'll be Skittles. That's gonna be it all. You're not gonna stop me, guys.
So that's about perspective, though. Like, Chris, I'm sure you worked in jobs before where like you got treated like crap, like compared to your jobs now. But at the time, you thought it was amazing because you came from a harder place. Perspectives are not just something that is put upon you, but also something that you can choose to put upon life.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like really, like those things that Chris mentioned, those are your 3 areas of focus. And I feel like it's hard to really be great at more than like 2 or 3 things in life. And so like there's this, I see it on Twitter a lot. It's like these areas of your life, right? There's like family, there's friendships, there's like, you know, romantic relationships, there is work, and then maybe there's like hobbies or like exercise. And like it's just, yeah, it's like hard to be great at all 5 of those things. Maybe you can be great at like 2 or 3. And that's just the fact of, you know, time in life. We all have the same amount of time. And so
Yeah.
next question here from
Can I say
sure.
one last thing about what Chris said there is one secret to success is to do less things.
Yeah.
And if you want to be successful, being successful is fun and being good at things is fun. And so if you want to be more successful and have more fun in your life, then do less things. Figure out how many things you can eliminate and then continuously eliminate more. So an example of that is my wife and I are not on social media. We don't consume social media because we cannot win at consuming social media. We can't get better at it.
Yeah. Yeah, like focus is always great. And actually that's something like we notice in a lot of job search candidates, right? It's like this new sort of burden of like 10 to 15 hours a week, right? And so like you have to come up with those hours somewhere. It means you have to deprioritize something in your life to prioritize that. Or like, you know, honestly, the past, like ever since I graduated college or even during college, like I've always been very, you know, career focused. And because of that, like, oh, maybe I wasn't like going out as much with my friends or wasn't traveling as much. Like, you know, on dates, like I'll get asked this question of like, what's the most spontaneous thing you've ever done? And I'm like, oh God, like this is not going to work out. Simply because like, that's not like, I'm very focused on, I know what I want out of my life, my goals. And so I set a schedule to sort of like accomplish those sorts of things. And so, you know, I maybe travel slightly more than you, Chris, but in general, like I hear sort of the themes of what you're talking about, and you know, I'm of the same mind there. And so we got a question from Hans here. He's curious how you prevent burnout if you're working on, you know, Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah, the first piece of okay, this is super trite, but then I'm going to dive in and try to give it less triteness. If you do work you love, then it does not feel like work. But most of the time, especially in enterprise sales, it does not feel like work you love. You know, if you want to have the optimized fun in an account executive role, you probably want to be in a mid-market account executives. Yeah, glad to do that, Ashley. Next. But yeah, you probably want to be in mid-market because if you're a mid-market account executive, you're with fun companies that are at a good growth stage. They're not too large. They're not too large where they're burdened by bureaucratic processes, and they're not too small where they're sort of rinky-dink. Mid-market account executive stuff is a blast. I had some of the most fun of my life every day selling in mid-market for Dell. Now in the enterprise space, a lot of what I do is look at the 14th version of the 3rd legal contract and have, you know, make sure that the 12 correct people are in the meeting room for the 7th thing. And so you can't do that if you don't love it. There are some people that are super passionate about that specific kind of enterprise sales. You need to work towards, you should have a long-term goal to work towards where your work is bringing you more and more joy every day. So a big way that I do that is in the work that I do, like with tech sales mentors. Another way you could do that is like, you could be making sure that you're moving towards selling products and working for companies that you love and are more and more passionate about. And I'm a believer in sort of I really believe that sales is where you're helping people solve problems and improving people's lives. And so if you can view your own sales career that way, then it's really empowering, it's really freeing, and there's a lot of joy in the products that you sell. But Hans, it's common in a lot of these roles to not feel like that. And the answer to that is like, you can't do it tomorrow, but you should realign your career. You should move towards being in an area of selling something that's more authentically aligned with what brings your heart joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, Samir, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah. Like one thing to just consider is like, for the audience, like Chris is going to be in sort of like the top 0.1% of like performers and wealth generated in life. And you don't have to do that. You can be the top 10%. You can be the top 20%. Yeah. You don't have to work the crazy hours that Chris works to be successful in tech sales. But if you want to be an enterprise AE in 3 years, he's giving you the formula to do
Yeah.
that. But let's say the more
You,
typical timeline is like 6-7 years to enterprise AE. If you're okay with that, then great. That's great. But like, you know, Chris is just trying to tell you, hey, here's, if you want to do this in this time frame, here's what you have to commit. Here's the sacrifice you have to make.
and you'll probably be like a lot happier and live a more fulfilled life if you don't actually hit the peak. If you instead aim for something like a mid-market account executive role, there's some a company would not hire you and pay you the salary they did if they didn't think that they could get more out of you than what they're paying you. So there is a point of diminishing returns for the amount of money that a company pays you, and that diminishing returns comes out of things like free time with your wife and kids, weekends, nights, those things. And so we should be people are not very good at calculating money versus time, but time is really, really valuable. And so we should really think about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, you know, you got this amazing bookshelf. Like what are some book recommendations that helped you along your journey? Maybe at a few key points, right? Like maybe before you, maybe early innings of your career, and then now like where you're at in your career.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple here that I'm going to put in.
All right.
All right. I'll tell you guys a couple. These are the good ones. Okay. So I would recommend Wild at Heart if you want to know how to have a healthy relationship with a man or a woman, you know, like with a significant other. If you want to know how to have a healthy relationship, which is pretty fundamental to success, because you're going to have all these periods of like where your willpower is for idiots. So instead, what you should do is you should have a partner that has strong will when you don't have strong will. And then you should also design systems so that you're not in places where you have to rely on willpower. So instead of convincing yourself not to eat the junk food, don't buy the junk food, don't keep it in the house. So this will help you have a healthy relationship, Wild at Heart. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius and all these things are like, they're super readable. If you look at Marcus, like none of this stuff all of these are like 4th grade reading level. Okay. I promise, nothing crazy. Meditations is how to be a stoic, how to have life's going to throw shit at you. Like bad things are going to happen to you in life or you're not alive. This is how to process that stuff, how to react to it, how to be thankful, to just be breathing. You know, you didn't have to be born. You didn't have to exist. It's a blessing even when a bad thing happens to you. So it helps you with that. The Almanac of Naval, Ravikant will teach you how, these are more, now we're getting into tech sales stuff. This will teach you actually, this is super essential to understanding why you should work in software sales, how the world works, how the economy works, how software sales companies work. And this will give you that 20,000 foot view to decide whether or not you're on the right track or whether or not you need to get out of the industry that you're in, out of the job you're in, stop doing the things that you're doing in your career. So it's really good. And that ties right into 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. This helps you understand software companies, how they work, why they think the way they do, why they act the way they do. So you can understand, I need to get the heck out of this company. They're about to have 20% layoffs next year. I can tell because of this and this. Or I need to jump into this industry. And even if it's a title cut, I know this industry is about to take off like a rocket. So I'm willing to do, and I can navigate and I know I can do it this way. This gives you that 20,000 foot view. And then Atomic Habits is huge. I mean, everybody loves Atomic Habits because this helps you set up the habits to have a successful life. This is huge. And this guy has a daily or a weekly mailing list that's huge. Okay, so the name of the books were Atomic Habits by James Clear, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel, the Almanac of Naval. This is probably the number one. Almanac of Naval, Ravikant. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This version is really good. And then Wild at Heart by John Eldridge.
There you go. Got some reading materials. Time to delete Twitter, delete Instagram. There you go, guys. So, all right, we got a good one here from a current applicant, Alex. So he's curious. The tech industry is always changing. And so do you think there's specific industries or criteria that offer better opportunities for success and growth for an SDR role? And so he's thinking of like, oh, should I join like an AI company or something like that fills a need rather than like a want?
Yeah, so I'll separate those two questions. I'll address the AI question first. AI is a lot more similar to me to crypto. This is it's like inflated. It can be dangerous for people to, it can be more risky to join AI companies right now because a lot of them are just swollen from VC, venture capital funding. And if they don't deliver the results the venture capital funds want, then those companies will not get new rounds of funding and they will have to conduct large scale layoffs. And what results do the venture capitalists want? Well, they want customer growth. So they want these companies to show that a bunch of companies or individuals have bought their product and are paying monthly recurring revenue for it. And I think that in AI currently, that is actually going to be incredibly hard to achieve. So I think that even OpenAI is going to, who is the leader in this industry, is going to incredibly struggle to maintain their user growth and the percentage of people that are paying for it. There will be big effects from AI in the industry, but they will not be from the flashy companies. Now, that's not to say like you shouldn't take a job with an AI company. There are some cool companies doing like customer service work in AI. It's pretty lit.
Yeah.
I think those are some of the better ones. But if it's super popular, if all your friends are talking about it, be scared. As far as wants versus needs, I see this thing all the time. And a big problem is that people who haven't been in tech sales for a long enough time don't actually understand the difference between those things. Like they think that they know what a want versus a need is for a company, and then often like they're wrong. One of the key trademarks of somebody who's been in tech sales for a long time, when they go to interview with a tech sales company, they'll say something like, "Hey, I know I don't understand your company fully, but here's the parts that I think I do understand," in an interview. Versus somebody brand new to the industry will say in an interview, "I understand completely what your company is and how they work, and that's why I'd be a good fit." And so it's very funny. The longer you work in tech sales, the more certain you are that you really don't understand all the nuances of each software company. But there's, I'm sure Samir would be glad to name some, there's some very counterintuitive software companies that you wouldn't expect to be needs, but are huge, very stable, needed companies that do great in recessions. Samir, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I like, there's this like saying right now that like, oh, tech is like recession proof and like all this kind of stuff. One, people don't know, like whatever, like the tech really hasn't been through a recession, right? Like that, like at least in its current form, right? The last actual recession, like legit one, was in like '08, right? And so kind of like if a company is, the way I like to think about it is there's like layers to filtering, and truthfully at the end of the day you don't actually know until like you're a few months into the role. And so like here are the layers of like filtering you go through to like building confidence and like if this is a legit company or not. And so the most easy filter is truthfully like, who are the venture capitalists backing this company? They have access to, metrics that you don't have. They get to chat with the leadership team. You don't get to do that. They get to chat with the founders for hours. And so you want to look for, okay, there's venture capital firms on their websites. They have their portfolios. They say who we've invested in the past, right? The venture capital firms where if you see they've invested in a company and then you look at their portfolio and see where else they've invested, if they've invested in other companies that you're well aware of today, or other sort of B2B tech companies you're aware of today, that's a good initial signal that, okay, they're picking a company that has some criteria that is legitimate here. So that's the first thing I consider. And this is for SDRs. That's the first thing I consider. The next two most important things really that I consider that I would prioritize is one, who's my SDR manager. And so when you're new to this world of like tech sales, there's going to be a lot you don't know. And so that means kind of your SDR manager really runs your world. They're going to tell you things and you're going to believe them. So hopefully that person is honest and truthful and not a manipulative manager, because there are those people. Tech isn't, just some la la land where everyone is great. There are some bad companies. There are some bad people in the industry. And so really getting a feel for, hey, do I feel like this person's personality meshes with mine? Do I feel like they're a manager who will challenge me in the ways I want to be challenged, will communicate to me in the ways I want to be communicated to, just aligns with me in terms of values. And then like, honestly, like the last most important thing for me is I've found the things I've performed best at in life is sort of where I'm most curious. And so as an example, like the company I joined, my first job in tech sales was a company. Today it's called Sift. Back then it was called Sift Science. That was their cool name. Now this is like their corporate name. And so, you know, when I joined them, they were a machine learning anti-fraud software. And so, okay, you go to Airbnb, there's all these ways you can commit fraud. You can post a fake listing on their website. You can post a fake review. You can use a stolen credit card. And so by using machine learning, you can understand user behavior and like understand, is this person acting fraudulently or not fraudulently? And that was just like endlessly fascinating to me. And so I remember my interview, my final round interview was in San Francisco. At the time I was at Michigan State in my senior year. And this was during finals week. And I was not studying for finals. I was like filling out whiteboards of like machine learning algorithms and like, you know, fraud, you know, industry reports. And I was just endlessly fascinated. And that shined through in the interview because I didn't have any formal sales experience. I had some of the good personality traits of a sales rep, but like what I led with was my curiosity, my knowledge, and my personality traits. And so that's not really related to industries. That's not really related to your question, Alex, but like those are the things I'd prioritize in sort of a tech sales opportunity. You know, AI is a good industry, but like, yeah, like Chris is saying, there's going to be a lot of crap within it. And you have to decide if you're okay with some volatility when it comes to your job. But over the long term, like if you're one of the early sales reps in AI and you truly get these things because you're endlessly curious and fascinated, then like over the next 5, 10, 15 years, that's going to set you up. But you also have to be aware of the risk of, well, some of these companies are going to go bust. It's hard to know that. Yeah, you have to be willing to bear that risk. And so final thing I'll say is, yeah, you really don't know how good a company is until being at that company for a few months, because they're just going to tell you things, right? They're not going to truthfully be 100% honest with you. And so
I heard a great quote the other day. I hope I'm going to tell my wife to cover her ears, but the quote is, "Nobody farts on a first date."
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's how these companies are going to act.
Yeah. And so like, that's why it's also good to like build a network in this industry. Like if your future opportunities can come from people you were previously employees with, like those people can give you the lowdown on what it's actually like at this company versus you going like blind into opportunities and, you know, figuring out 2 months in, it's like a shit storm or whatever. And so, cool. Oh, so one question I had for you that I forgot to ask was, you know, you were at Jump Cloud, right? And so some competitors in that space, like Rippling is one, right? And like Rippling is like this tech darling, right? Everyone's like, this is such an amazing company. Do you think like that branding matters of like joining a Rippling versus a Jump Cloud? Or is it just like, hey, good sales reps can like perform well no matter what sort of, you know, environment they're in?
Wow. You can't perform well no matter what. Kusal, it is impressive, the Naval thing. I saw that. You can't perform well no matter what. There are certain situations that a rep will get placed into where there's just no winning. And it's up to you, just like I said at the beginning of this, I made a decision in my life to impact things, have an impact on things instead of being impacted by them. And if you can see that you don't have product market fit, your company doesn't have product market fit, there's just no product to sell, but you're still expected to hit impossible, then you need to figure out a way to migrate out of that situation to a better situation. That responsibility is on you. When you see the train coming towards you, there is some percentage of responsibility that's on you to get off of the train tracks, regardless of if the train kills you. If you saw the train coming 10 minutes ago, it's your job to get off the train tracks. There is a ton that people can do to better control their situations. And in a situation like that, you should do both. You should work nights and weekends to sell this product that you think is impossible, and then you should spend the extra hours finding a new position. Michael Phelps had some complaint. He said, people complain every day that they don't have my genetics, but they don't show up at the pool, but they're not at the pool 7 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's so much inside of your control as well.
Yeah, totally noticing that theme of work ethic here. Cool. So then, okay, cool. I think we got one more question here. And so if any final questions, throw them in. And then, you know, I think we're going to wrap in a few minutes. So, another one from Alex. How do you what do you focus on learning on a daily basis to like get better and better?
Yeah. And before I dive into that, I saw that question, best advice for converting leads. I think we're going to, or Samir's going to do a webinar in the next couple of weeks or months about how to do cold calling. And so that would cover that question. That would be a whole hour covering how do you get, you know, we would cover that, but it's just too big. That's a question that we need more time for. But, how do I keep learning? Is that the question?
Yeah. Like how do you keep learning on a daily basis and getting better and better? Like what's your focus on like, oh, what should I be learning? Stuff like that. There's so much to learn.
Yeah. So most of the content in our lives is not helping us at all. It's just sort of a treadmill. So eliminate as much noise as you can and like just keep chipping at this. Eliminate as much noise as you can. And then you want to get down to foundational life principles. And then you just want to practice those things again and again and again. I think it was Bruce Lee or somebody said, I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 punches. I fear the man who's practiced one punch a million times.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to be. That's the secret to happiness. Whatever you're unhappy about in your life, it's probably not what you think it is. If you think you're unhappy because you're broke, you're probably not unhappy because you're broke. You're probably unhappy because you haven't practiced a handful of things enough times. You're doing too many things. So solidifying that down. You're going to learn things that you're interested in. I have no idea what. There's tons of boring things like my neighbor's name that I should know that she's told me, you know, but I don't remember it. But there's things about history that I can remember that I learned 5 years ago because I am deeply interested in them. So try to figure out how to get paid to do things that you're interested in, even if the pay is just so low, and then you'll get better at that.
I
advice
think
there, Samir?
Yeah, we're always kind of looking for like that magical next piece of advice. When in general, like we've heard all the advice like we need to. And it's kind of like one way to think about this is I'm blanking on it right now. Oh yeah, so like there's this girl that I met last night, and she runs this really cool thing in Austin. It's called like the Boardwalks. And so we just it's like, you know, a few mile walk in Austin at 8 a.m. on Saturday. Haven't made it because 8 a.m. on Saturday is not my thing, but, you know, cool idea. And, you know, they talk about all these interesting topics and all that kind of stuff. And she's a big time content creator. And she's like, yeah, I maybe consume like 30 minutes of content from others like a week. I was like, that's kind of impressive. And, you know, it's basically this concept of like, we have this diet, right, that we eat, right? Okay, if you eat McDonald's, like then your body's going to feel like shit. If you eat good food, then you're going to feel great. And so like you need to think of the same thing as like the content you're putting in your head. And we always feel this like desire to constantly stimulate ourselves with music, with a podcast, with a YouTube, with Netflix, whatever. It leaves no room to think and reflect and whatever. And so like cultivating spaces of like silence to just allow your mind to actually think about the things that are important, the advice that is actually important, is great. The next best thing also is like trying to like find content on your own and like suss out, oh, I need this piece of advice right now. Generally isn't the best way to go. Like that's what I did like my first 2 years of entrepreneurship, and like shit went way too slow. When I started talking to other entrepreneurs who were ahead of me, like they were able to quickly diagnose the issue because they had went through it before me. And so like, instead of you trying to get awareness of what you need next, using others who know better than you and just asking them and getting the brutal honesty and truth from them is a way quicker way to go about all of this. So that'd be kind of the advice there.
And the last thing I'll say on that, the best way to learn is to do. And the best way to do is in the smallest way that you possibly can. So figure out whatever your goal is and then try to cut it in half like 12 times. But literally, when I walk up the stairs there's like 12 stairs in my house. I don't think I'm going to walk upstairs. I think I'm going to put my right foot on the right stair. I'm going to lift my left foot. I'm going to put my left foot on the left stair. And I trained myself to do that. I practiced doing that because I wanted that philosophy to apply to my life. Because as soon as a process gets too big, then we give up on it. And so I'm ruthless about breaking down whatever I need to do to myself. Like, nope, that's not small enough. That's not small enough. It's easy to take action.
I'm just imagining you right now saying like left, right as you walk up your stairs, and it's a very hilarious sort of picture right there.
Ashley, okay. You should work with Samir. You're saying any advice to get your foot in the door, applying for jobs seems never ending. Apply to Tech Sales Mentors.
Yeah. What do you think are like the broad themes there of, okay, like a candidate comes to us, they're not getting in interviews beforehand, and then like we help them get into interviews. What do you think like the change you've noticed is?
Yeah. So I did say, these companies are sometimes getting thousands of applicants for a role. And at that point, the company and the recruiter has to go into disqualify, not qualify mode. And so if there's any basic errors that are just super minor, nitpicky errors in your resume, your LinkedIn, then you're going to get thrown out the door. So you may be applying to 1,000 companies a week, but if you have some minor error, and so it may not even be an error, it may just be like an industry standard that you don't know about, then you'll get chucked in the basket. And so that's A. But then B is pulling these stories out of people and teaching them how to correctly tell these stories. For instance, there's 5 basic questions that you're going to get asked in over 80% of the questions are the same 5 questions in every first round interview. It's, tell me about yourself, why sales, why tech sales, what are your salary expectations? There's another one. What am I missing?
Why our company?
Why do you want to work for us? Why do you want to work for us? Yeah, why do you want to work for our company? And if you don't know how to answer those questions with like compelling stories that are impactful, that are personal to you, but also that are short, that speak to the point, and don't just ramble on, then you're going to get chucked. You're going to get chucked out of the process. And so Tech Sales Mentors what Samir does is an incredible resource to help people accomplish that. And everybody has that gold in them. They oftentimes need help pulling it out.
Yeah. Actually, if you're not getting into interviews through applying online, it could mean one of 2 things. It could mean, like you have the experience, but there's something wrong with your resume. Even if that's the case, then there's like another approach that makes sense. And so I can chat about that in a second. But the other thing is like, oh, well, if you don't have like the sales experience or sales applicable experience, like, being a recruiter or a business owner or some other prestigious fields that like tech is cool with, like, consulting or, finance, then you're not going to get into interviews. And so you need to get that experience first. But let's say you do have that experience. Let's say there are things you can you can sell yourself with, right? Like quota carrying experience, revenue generated, kind of stuff like that. Then you need to stop applying online. The way, we approach this is we do cold outreach to hiring managers and recruiters. And we don't just like send them spam. It's like highly personalized messages to those individuals. And we'll do that. We'll like sell you a little bit, and then we'll make the ask in the email. We'll say, hey, we want to interview. And so we're good at it. I think maybe we've sent 20,000 cold emails in the life of the business. And so we just know how to do this. When we work with a candidate, within 1 week, they'll be in 2 to 4 interviews. And so that would be my recommendation, is try that. If that doesn't work for you, then, hit us up and we can try to help out here. And so, last question, and then I'll let you, enjoy your life with your family, and, very grateful for you to join me today. So Dustin's curious of, in the past, you've gotten into these great companies, you've gotten into these great roles. How have you impressed and sort of stood out to a company during the interview process?
Yeah. And so, Dustin, I think that you used the word impressed just to convey your message. So I don't think you like had special intonation on that, but I never try. So I don't try to like impress them, because I think, I don't know, there's something there about like the goal is not to impress. The goal is to authentically convey who I am. and to let them know that if I'm not a good, I want it to be so crystal clear what kind of person I am. Because if we're not a good fit, then I don't want to pursue that. Really, I don't want to waste their time, and I don't want them to waste my time. And so I think when you come from a root of authenticity, that helps. Instead of trying to like get in the door and get the position, you'll have a much higher success rate when you are authentic in a polished way. And so the way that we get that, the way that we get results, the way that I get results in interviews has been, I think of recruiters and HR people a lot like employees at a chicken processing plant, where their job is to take the chicken. So these are the people interviewing with them every day. And so when you are the chicken, how are you going to look at that recruiter, that hiring manager, and make them see you as a human? How do you stand out? How do you cut the glaze out of their eyes and make them see you as a human being? And so that should shine through your authenticity and your polish in your interview, in your interactions with them, and that they've done this 10,000 times. And when you do that, the secret to do that is authenticity. And when you do that, then you start to form human relationships with people where they want you to be successful. They want you to be part of their life. They want to see you again next week. And then that generates results.
Yeah.
I think is the answer to that.
Yeah. And I think like some of the hard truths with this answer is also like simply hours put in. Like I remember you've told me stories about like you and your wife, like she would like say the answers to you for hours upon hours, right? And like since you're in the industry, you can give her the feedback that she needs to hear, right? Rather than like just talking to into an echo chamber and not getting the feedback that you need. Or like, I've heard you say this with candidates sometimes, and like this is perfect, right? You need to take your phone, turn it off, leave it downstairs. You need to go upstairs. You need to go to a room. You need to close the door. You need to practice these answers for 5 hours. And that's the hard, cold truth of this is like your answers need to sound authentic. Like good salespeople are confident, high energy, don't sound like a scripted politician. And simply you need to nail those answers to do that. And so that's one angle. Another angle is like,
and just to comment on that, to get my current role with HubSpot, my wife and I went to a coffee shop right when it opened. We stayed there, I think, for 8 hours straight. And what we wrote down the questions we thought they were going to ask and our answers. And she would ask me the question, I would answer it, and then we would look at what our line was and see what I had missed, and then we would repeat. We did that for 8 hours straight. So and then once you pass through the zone of perfect memorization, you begin to enter the zone of authenticity, and that's beyond it.
Yeah, it just comes naturally and all that kind of stuff. It's like flashcards, right? With Quizlet and all that kind of stuff. It's just college all over again. And yeah, some other good stories here is like, I this one AE told me a story of the AE market is just as hard as the SDR market right now. And one way she broke through the noise was like kind of, again, just being a human. And so she was speaking to this sales leader, and the sales leader, like the small talk at the beginning, which you absolutely need to do. You need to build rapport at the beginning of interviews. You need to research that person. And instead of saying, how's the weather in X city, or what city do you live in? Like go a step deeper where you find something about them and comment about it. And, in that small talk, the sales leader was saying how he was going to Dubai. And this AE had lived in Dubai for so long. Like she grew up there. And so what she did was after the interview, she sent her thank you note, always send the thank you note. And in that, she included like 5 recommendations of places that he or she would like in Dubai. And so that just shows sort of this human touch that like you're really caring about this interview process, this person, that kind of stuff. The last angle is just most candidates don't do research on a company. Like a lot of our candidates will get this feedback in interviews where the recruiter or hiring manager says, oh, wow, like you really researched our company. Most people don't do that. And so simply like you may be like, oh, how do I research a company? Go to their funding stories. So like if you type in the company name and funding, like the CEO will talk about their vision, their mission, like their growth, their traction, all that kind of stuff. if you like go to their customer stories, you'll find something interesting to like say, like show that you understand the problems that their product solves. If you look at their sales leaders, you can like find something that you find impressive about those sales leaders and talk about how you want to work and learn from someone just like that. And so put in the work, do your research, and like, you know, come off as authentic with your answers is what we'll say there. So, so great. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. This was wonderful. And yeah, how should people like connect with you, all that kind of stuff?
Chris, I guess people can reach out to me at for the work I do with Samir at chris@techsalesmentors.com or on my LinkedIn or however they want to. But yeah, how should they reach out to you, Samir, if they're interested in learning more about Tech Sales Mentors, stuff like that?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You know, you probably came here from my LinkedIn, techsalesmentors.com, all that kind of stuff. And so, so yeah, looking forward to hearing from you guys, and hope this was valuable. Hope, you know, you are headed into your weekend a little bit pumped up about your future career.
Yeah.
And reach out to us if you have any other questions. We'd be happy to help.
Thank you guys for coming.
Bye, everyone.